Hi, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hope you all had a wonderful midterm exam. Very satisfying, very nice and fun experience. Sadly, we won't have time in class to discuss the questions, but if you have any, please come and see me in office hours. I will gladly answer them. Okay, so today I suggest we see a last concept from the appendix of chapter 6, and then we can jump in firms. So this last concept may be a bit tricky, so yeah, let's dive into it and don't hesitate to ask questions. All right, so we start with a nice blank slate again. Right, so this is going to be, yeah, so let's call this. So Sitsky compensation or decomposing income distribution. Okay, so let's start up with the same examples we had last time. So we had clothing and food. Yeah, so I'm having trouble with my mouse. I tried to fix it like 10 minutes ago. I think it's working now, but I hope I don't have any issue. Okay, so here it is. Clothing, food. So let's say our initial budget constraint is that one. And then the price of food doubles. This goes red. Imagine we were consuming, let's see here, before, and now we're consuming, let's see here. All right, and let me use some color that's not too intense. Yeah, green is fine. Wow, I'm drawing beautifully today. Quite happy. This. Sort of. All right. So let's call this thing points. A is where we start and B. So what's going on? Initial basket, initial, yeah, consumption. A, then final consumption. All right. So just to see if we're still on the same page as last time. So is this good? So what is food here? Is this an ordinary good or a given good?
Ordinary?
Yes, good. Why? Because I was consuming when the price of food was was low. I was consuming a big quantity, and then when the price increased, double, then I drop my consumption from A to B. So this is what we see is the total effect. So I'm going to use some blue here. So blue. That's total effect. And now you may remember that we had graphs in which we decomposed the demand of a good into substitution effect and income effect. But I told you, if you don't see it on the graph, why there's a substitution and a compensation effect, that's perfectly normal, because nothing indicated you that something or the other was going on. You just saw some demand curve like this, and you said, oh, there's a slight section that's consumption, there's a slight section that's substitution. So here is how we're going to decompose it. So what we want is to see what happens to the consumption of food when there is purely a change in income and when there is purely a change in relative price from the price of food relative to clothing. And here is the nice trick that Slutsky proposed. So Slutsky was just a nice researcher. So he's saying, okay, so the final price of food is at consumption B here, but what's going on? Since there's a change in price, this also affects my purchasing power because I become poorer. I cannot here at B, I cannot consume as much food as before, but as much clothing as before. So here is saying, but let's try to decompose the effect into two things. So let's do that by compensating the income of the person such that at the new relative prices, so at the new relative prices, which is at B here, we compensate the income such that the initial consumption basket was available. So I'm going to use. Can somebody mute themselves?
Boy, có cái khao. This one doesn't work.
Somebody, you are not muted. Okay, fine. All right. So here, let me try to use my.
Chỉ xây 2 hàng thôi, thôi ạ, 2 hàng lên xong bắt đầu nhô kia lên là xong thôi. Đừng xây nhiều, mình không cần cao đâu, để trang trí. Con chú nhìn thấy nó ốp vân lên chưa?
Oh, thanks. Thank you. All right. So as I was saying before this chaos, so what Slutsky is suggesting here is imagine that we have the new relative prices, but such that, so the new relative prices means that this budget line is steeper than before because food is more expensive than clothing, but such that we can still consume the initial consumption point here at A. And if we do that, then it's like if starting from A, we had food that was a bit more expensive and clothing that was a bit less expensive, so that the purchasing power is the same as before. And in that case, we can see what happens to food consumption purely in response to its relative price compared to clothing. And if our budget curve was this one, then what would the person do? Well, probably consume somewhere like here, for instance. So that's what we would call the substitution effect. And we would be somewhere, let's use this green dashed line. And it's not something that actually exists because the price, just the price of food decreased. and the price of clothing didn't change. But this is, in theory, what could have happened. Well, in theory, this new budget line could have existed, and this new consumption point would have existed. So this would have been the consumption of the person, and so we observe two movements now. One is let's use the green from here to here, and this we say is the income effect, and then from here to here we say it's the the substitution effect here, and from here to here is the income effect. So let me use, let's say red for that. Okay. Actually, let me use the same. All right, so what can I say now? Well, I see that the substitution effect is negative. Well, it's always negative in the sense that if there is an increase in the price of food relative to clothing, then people always want to reduce their consumption of food. And then what is the second effect? Well, now I go from this point to that point, and here there is no change in relative prices. It's purely a change in income from here to here. And let me put some C there for compensated. So this is the Slutsky compensation. All right. What did I want to add? So are you following? Is that all right?
Sir, what's the dotted line for? It's a bit confusing.
Yeah, so I'll do it again. I'll say it again. So here we start. Oh yeah, I remember what I wanted to say. So here we start with the blue budget. Yeah, so I'm going to say one blue budget line. Two, price of food increases, and so consume A. Consume B, and then 3, we compensate the income such that the initial consumption bundle A can be but at the new relative prices, and so consumption is a result. Consumption C. All right. So we start with the blue line, then the price of the food increases, and then we give money to the person, but at the new relative prices, such that the person could, in principle, still consume its the initial consumption bundle. But as we see, since the relative prices have changed, then A doesn't seem so interesting, and we see that C gives the person a better utility because it lies on a higher utility function. I'm putting it in dotted line because it's not something that actually happened. The new price is that price. The new budget line is that budget line, but in principle, we could have compensated the person. And then we see that the substitution effect is negative because there's a decrease in consumption of food from A to C. And here the income effect is also negative. So it means that from C to B, then the food is a normal good. Okay.
By the way, the green lines are like they're in different squares. They measure the marginal utility.
Yes, they measure the utility in general, and yeah. So this one makes the person happier than this one, and then this one is the less interesting.
And the like the red dotted line. I still have like issues in understanding.
Yeah,
like is that the effect for like if you were to substitute?
This is yes. It's so the red line is what? Let's write it down again. So budget line compensated. Wow, how should I say that? Okay, so new relative prices compensated with income such that the initial consumption fee would be attainable. So yeah, new relative prices, but then we compensate the income such that A would be attainable. It doesn't mean that the person will consume A. In fact, here we see that the person would prefer consuming C. So it makes sense. Since food is more expensive, then the person would switch from food to clothing.
But how does the budget line increase? How did it initially increase?
So here from the final budget line to the compensated budget line, it's because we gave money to the person. Here, the person has less purchasing power because food is more expensive and clothing is the same price as before. Then we give the person money such that even if food is more expensive, it would be possible to consume the initial quantity of food and clothing. But we see that since food is still relatively more expensive than clothing, then the person would rather switch from A to C.
Is there an example you could give?
An example of this?
Well,
well, that's just a theoretical construct.
Okay.
It's just and now, so yeah, I don't want to spend too long on this. So you can read the chapter if you like. I just want to show you one final point. Is how do I know that this substitution effect is always negative? How do I know that? Because we said, oh, substitution effect is always negative for normal good, but I told you no, it's negative for all possible sources of goods. Here we know how we know it is the case. This is a bit more advanced, but I think it's easy to understand still. All right. Yeah. The substitution effect is always here is why. So imagine that the person consumes here. Okay, so that's A. And then we change the relative prices between food and clothing, but around A, so such that A is always available. So what happens? Well, what is A here? A is the best choice that the person could make given its possibility of consumption, which were this whole triangle. So this is all the possible bundle of consumption that the person could choose. And A was the actual choice, right? So, so this is... Okay, so if, for instance, this bundle was preferable to A, that person would have chosen it because it's affordable. The person chose A because that's the thing that was best. And now we change the relative price such that A is still available. So this should be there. Imagine we're not that extreme. Imagine we compensate this way. So now, what are after the compensation, what are the compensation bundles that are available? Let's use red here. So this is available choices. After compensation. What do we see? So we see that the person could either consume more food, less food, or stay at the same consumption as before. So question for you, do you think it's possible that the person would like to consume more food than before after we have compensated, we have changed the relative prices of food and clothing?
I don't think so.
Why not?
Because food was less expensive before and they didn't want more. So why would they want more now that it's more expensive?
Yes, so I agree with you, but could you be a bit more precise in terms of what we see in the graph there? So as I told you, the blue triangle are all the choices that were initially available for the person. And the red triangle are the ones that are newly available to the person. And the question is, could the person want to consume, for instance, more food or less food than before?
So less food, because after before the prices were lower, so they actually like wanted more food, and now because the prices got higher,
Yes.
they will want less food.
Yeah, it makes sense that they want less food, but can you, so, okay. So last chance.
Is it because like all the possibilities that are more food were available when it was blue?
Yes, exactly. Exactly the case. So after the compensation, the only new bundles, yeah, the only bundles, new bundles, yeah, the only bundles newly available to the person contain less food than before. Yeah, so person was consuming at A. Then there's a change in relative prices. Is it possible that I want to consume more food? Well, no, because all of these consumption bundles that are available, which contain more food than at A, they were also available before. They were part of the initial choice set. The only ones that are newly available are these ones there, the ones that only contain red, that became newly available after we have compensated the person. So there's the more I could consume in food is to stay at A exactly. If I stay at A, consume the same quantity of food, but it's perfectly reasonable to imagine that no, the person is actually going to consume somewhere on this red dotted line there that actually contains less food than before. So that this is why we see that the substitution effect is always negative for all and you see here, for instance, here the substitution effect means there's a decrease from A to C. And here the income effect is also negative because we still, well, actually it's positive because it's from B to C, we increase the income. But so I don't want to confuse you excessively. So let's finish here and let's go back to the firm, unless there is a last question. No? All right, so let's go back to firms. Chapter 7. All right. So this class is going to be quite more descriptive than the other, so it's going to go faster, I guess. Okay, so here we were. We just last time we had just described different types of firms, and now we're going to look basically at how firms work, at least in the short run. So what are firms? They are, well, they can be local or they can be global. So if they are global, we say they're multinational. And you can write them MNEs. yeah, it could be that you have some person that exports stuff to other countries, but usually there are big corporations that do that. And we have trade theory that relies on the fact that yes, the larger firms are the ones that export. Yeah, and they have increased greatly in the last decade. It's part of the global trend of globalization. Even though, yeah, there are some pressure from some countries like the US to restrict trade. Yeah, the tendency still is more and more global. Okay, so what do firms use to start up, start to operate? To buy initial thing? Well, they need some financial capital for that. So they use it, yeah, I could say. Use it to buy physical capital. Hire people. Yeah, so it's distinct from physical capital, such as factories, machinery, offices, fleets of vehicles. Yeah, so the basic types of financial capital is equity and debt. So debt is borrowing money. At the bank. And equity is selling shares on the stock market. Yeah, and this means that basically you don't own your firm totally, but other investors can own part of it, and in exchange they give some influx of financial capital. The other way to do it is just go to the bank and say, I have the greatest idea ever. I'm going to make tons of money, and I'm going to be able to give you back your money plus some interest on it. So the bank is convinced and they lend you money. So that's the two ways to do it. So equity, the individual.
Sir, can you go back for a minute,
yeah.
please?
So if it's, yeah, we're going to be a bit more precise about what all of these things are. Okay.
Not yet, sir. I'm a bit behind on taking the notes because I have some workmen at the house today.
Okay. Anyways, this is going to be shared on the Moodle page. So if you miss something, you can still always see that there. Okay, so yeah, so what is equity? So equity is yeah, individual proprietorships and partnerships. One or more owners provide much of the required funds for the firm. So if you are just a single person, then you go to see your aunt and your brother-in-law and all these people and say, oh, please give me money. I have this great, and I'm going to pay you back later. But it's so they have to trust you. One thing that you can do before you go, you make the firm public is you can find some initial investors. So for instance, yeah, before going public. You can also find something like angel investors. So it's very high risk. it's before it's a big corporation that has a good stream of revenue. You may think, oh, it's a small firm, but I like this new technology that they're developing. So yeah, so some people may have seen this on TV. Do you know what the TV shows are called?
Shark Tank and Dragon's Den.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes I would like to be able to invest in these small firms, and if you think they're super good and they're going to be big one day, but yeah, you cannot just give them money, right? Well, I don't know if you would do it, but yeah, usually they partner up with some angel investors. Yeah, so yes. Yeah, and then what happens is, as when the firm eventually makes profit, then they can pay it back to shareholders in terms of in the form of dividends. That's free for a corporation. So that's what's nice about having stock options, is that not only do you hope that the value of your investment goes up because the firms become more and more valuable, but also if the firm makes a profit, they can give you these dividends back. So you have two ways of making money with owning equity, so that's good. All right. The other is, of course, going to the bank. The firm's creditors are not owners, they are usually banks. And you can borrow from financial institutions. They are obligated to pay, the firms are obligated to. So let me add something, not firm, but everybody. So I have to pay back when or actually, even it's not entirely true otherwise. So if you don't want to pay back, what can you do?
Go bankrupt.
Yeah, you go bankrupt. So that's why they call it angel investors, or that's because it's risky, and you take a gamble, and you like, or that's why banks have risk premiums on debt for some types of firms, because they both go bankrupt so often that, or yeah, other option. Or if you're Donald Trump, you just don't pay back. But yeah, not going to write this. It's that I don't want to be provocative, but yeah, you can be you can go to court and never pay back people, but yeah, normally you don't do that. All right.
Sir, what is IOU?
I have never thought about this.
Sir, I mean,
It's just
money.
yeah, I owe you money, but yeah, there's nothing more to it than this. I think it's just that. I owe you. Yeah, that's just an okay. They say it's a informal document acknowledging debt. All right, so it's just some other sort of loan agreement. Oh, these questions I never expect them. All right. So two key assumptions about firm behavior. So we assume that firms maximize their profit, which is their revenue stream minus their cost. And each firm is assumed to be a single consistent decision-making unit. So why is this an assumption? Because you could say more precisely. Difference between actual profit and firm and what is the difference? Well, because the firm value reflects not only the actual immediate profit, but also the promise of future profits. That's why firms like, I don't know from Amazon, but like Tesla, for instance, they made losses after losses after losses after losses for many years. I think they've recently started having some tiny profit, but even with these huge losses, their market value was so high. Why? Because it's a future of its promise of future profit. If I own something that I know will be super profitable in 10 years, then if I sell it to somebody else, that person is willing to give me a lot of money because, again, they know that if they keep it, eventually they're going to be rich with it. So do firms maximize the profit in the now or the future value? Well, generally we think that they are forward looking, but since in our model we don't really have a big dimension of time, we're just going to assume that they are profit maximizers. That's it. But yeah, normally they would maximize shareholder value, not profits. And then, yeah, so we assume that each firm is a single consistent decision-making unit. Otherwise, what that would mean is, we would say that, yeah, shareholders and the manager and even yeah, employees all have their specific agendas. So that there are some models that describe this that are called principal agent models, in which the shareholder, they give control of the firm to manager and they hope that the managers do their best, but in the end the managers can try to maximize their own I don't know, their own income and it could be at the expense of the shareholder value. So, but obviously that's very complicated. So all I'm saying with these 2 points is that's the departure from reality. If we go there, it's more complicated, but it's more realistic. Yeah, so based on these 2 assumptions, then we can say that economists can predict the behavior of firms in various situations. And then, yeah, other complications. So what about social responsibility of firms? Are firms supposed to just care about their profits or not? So economists may say, well, there's only one goal for a firm is to make profit, that's it, to maximize its value, and it doesn't have a social role. Some other would say yes, but the firm should have a social role too. So yeah, it's a philosophical standpoint. What I can do is, I can say about this is that what a firm tries to convince people is, oh, I'm a good citizen in the country, I'm helping the environment, I'm helping people. But it's more often than not, it's probably to convince either employees to come and work for their firm or clients to buy the firm's products. So it looks like it has some profit objective at the back of it if you say that you're a good citizen. Yeah, recently I've seen a study on this, on the fact that they were asking why do firms pretend or try to show that they're environmentally responsible and nice, and they were saying that yeah, it has a lot to do with not paying high wages. Because if you say, oh, we're a small firm and we don't make a lot of profit, so we cannot pay you good wage, but at least we're trying to do something good for the environment and the world. So then people are going to say, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to earn a lot of money, but at least I'm going to work for a nice project. So it's a very good way to not pay your employee. It might be cynical to say that, but yeah, that's what they were claiming. What about the environment? Well, so what I could say is this. So there's a difference between private costs and benefits and social costs and benefits. And this is seen in public economics or environmental economics. Yeah, so it's definitely true that lots of things are going on in firms that are not good for the environment, but are good for themselves. So how does the government fit in? Well, if that's the case, they have to tax or legislate to, so what we call this in political economics or environmental economics is to internalize the costs in firms' decision. So of course that is way beyond this class. So, but that's the exact vocabulary we use. So what we want to,
Sarah?
yeah.
Can a firm do an internal financing for? So, for example, she does her own financing, while the external financing, I think she will use the intermediate of government and banks. Is it the thing, or like?
Oh no, it says it's so yeah. I should. So the name of this is externalities.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but so thanks for that. But yeah, so it's called externalities. And what it is I can give you a small, very easy example. So if I pollute a river, I'm a firm, then what do I care personally? I care about my own profit, and I use the river as some external thing I don't care about. But if people care about having clean water because they live there or they fish there, then it's what we call an externality for them. So what would you do as a government? Well, you could do many things, but one would be to just tax these pollution, these emissions, so that the firm now takes this into account. So it's a sort of placing a monetary value on the bad impact you had on the environment. So that's why we call this internalize. Yeah. So how can firms be motivated to change their behavior? Changing the legislation. That's one. Yeah, but also a cynical thing you could say about this is that sometimes incumbent firms, like big firms, they have deep pockets, and what they want is to make sure that the new firms that start invading their territory in some ways. They have a hard time. So then they go see the government and they say, yeah, we should add these and these and these legislation to protect the environment. But in the end, what they know is, okay, every firm in the sector is going to be hurt by this new legislation, but my competitor is going to be hurt even more than me. So then I become virtuous. Then again, maybe it's me who's being cynical. I don't know. All right. Production. So firms use for, oh, by the way. Just wanted to know what time it was. All right, so the firm produces, of course, and to produce, you need what we call inputs in production. So just as consumers consume things like food and clothing, so firms produce, and to produce something, they have these inputs, which are production inputs. So they can be some, or you could call them intermediate inputs, intermediate products. So they could be produced by nature. So these are just natural resources. Labor, so employees. And physical capital, like machines. It's no big deal. Okay, here's how we would describe it. So production function shows the maximum output that can be produced by a combination of inputs. So it's a function of technology. So one thing I should say here is what do we mean by maximum? Well, we mean that it could be possible for me to buy a terrain, buy land, so and build a firm on it and hire a bunch of people, but then manage it very poorly and not produce anything. So if I was very incompetent. So what we say is the production function shows the best thing you can do with the actual current technology if you manage everything perfectly well. And the only thing we need here is to assume, of course, that firms are rational agents. So they want to make profit, and by producing as much as they can, the maximum quantity they can, then that's how they make their profit. In terms of functional notation, that's how you would write it. So Q equals F of L K. Well, there are many different notations, but here it would be L for labor. This would be labor input, and this would be capital input. And what this says is, what is the maximum quantity I will produce if I have, say, 10 units of labor and 10 units of capital, which could be anything like 10 machines and 10 employees. Production is a flow concept in the sense that if I think of it my firm, like my buildings, the buildings are a stock, are just a fixed cost I have to pay. And then production is what I do with it. And it's something that I do every day, for instance. So you could say something like production per day, or production per trimester, or production per week. So explicit costs involve purchasing goods and services for the firm. So explicit, what we mean by that, it means stuff I didn't have before, so stuff I have to acquire. So hiring workers, renting equipment, interest payments and debt, purchase of intermediate inputs. So intermediate inputs would be, I didn't define it. We were defining it here, yeah. So intermediate inputs could be something like auto parts that are going to be able to make me to help me produce the my final product. It's a car, for instance. So that would be more in the spirit of assembling stuff. Or it could be too that I use iron ore and I sell iron, for instance. So the intermediate product would be iron ore. All right. Another explicit cost is depreciation. So what is depreciation? It's the fact that if I use stuff, it loses value. Everybody who owns a car knows about this, or should. If you drive around, at some point your car breaks down. So that's what happens to anything, any physical stuff. So you have to pay for machine replacement. So that's life, and you have to take that into account. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to produce for a very long. And the accounting profit is the revenues, so the sales times the price minus the explicit costs. So these explicit costs. And why do you say it's accounting profit? Because we have also implicit costs that we're going to see later. Yeah, so this is really what we just said. So the economic profit is the explicit, so the revenues minus the explicit costs. So implicit costs, what are they? They are anything that say the people who own the firm, they actually have to sacrifice to make the firm work, but they don't really have to explicitly write it up as an expense for the firm, for instance, but it still exists. So we're going to see that. So well, this say it later. So let me just go one slide later, and then so this is what we mean by implicit cost. So owner's time, owner's capital. So what does that mean? It's something like, okay, if I have a small firm that I'm starting at home, and I used to have free time, but now I'm just going to spend some hours per day working on my new idea. Well, I'm not writing it as explicitly as a wage that I'm paying myself, but it's sort of the same thing. So that's what we say. It's an implicit cost. And again, if I have to use some room in my house, then instead of using my living room to just enjoy myself and watch TV, then I repurpose it to use it to make stuff at home. So that's also something that I had that I lose. So this is, it's not so important, because anyways, big firms, at some point, there's no more implicit costs. It's really more important for small costs. All right, so going back, so what we say is economic profit is when we account for these costs. It's revenues minus explicit costs. So what I have to actually go and buy to the store, and people I have to pay, and implicit costs. So what it costs for me to run the firm. Or you could say also it's accounting profit. So revenues minus explicit cost minus implicit costs. But again, we say it here, but it's not something you should lose lots of sleep over it. Negative economic profits are called economic losses. So, or being in the red. So if you're in the red, it means things are not going so well. You should turn the boat around. Oh yeah, so explicit costs, what are they? So that this is, for instance, yeah, so you would have something like wages and salaries, intermediate inputs, rent if you rent the place, interests on loans if you went to the bank and had to get a loan to buy all these yeah, if you rent, then it's not like, well, you could go to the bank and ask for some loan so you can rent your place too, but you can also buy it. And depreciation, since you have to replace your machines at some point, so the total explicit cost would be yeah, 1160. Now, would we have an so yeah, so will we make a profit here if the total revenue is 2,000?
Yes.
Yes. Profit. All right, but then you can add these implicit costs. Yeah, so yeah, go back. Yeah, accounting profit. Implicit costs. Well, the owner, since it's a small gourmet soup company, and the person probably works on weekends or at home at night, then you could evaluate the time you spend on your firm. So it would be opportunity cost of time, 160. Owner's own capital. So usually, if you're a small owner, you just use your own money to start your business. So then the total implicit cost would be 265. So the total economic profit would take your accounting profit and subtract the implicit cost, and you get your economic profit, which would still be positive. So that would be very good. I could add in the implicit cost, you could also add fun. So initial year of restaurant. Fun, and then later years. Sometimes it's fun. Yeah, because that, in a way, it's, yeah, if you have to, if you take into account other things, then you can take into account the fact that it's somehow enjoyable to do it. Then it's sort of, you could take into account. You could say, well, I could go to the movie, but I'd rather think about my next product, and it's enjoyment for me. But then if you don't care about that anymore and you're sad to work on at your soup company, then it's and you go to the psychologist to help yourself cope with it. But yeah, I'm not going to add that to confuse you, but yeah, so you could add lots of things to this thing there. All right, so
I have
profit.
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How come the opportunity cost of the owner's capital isn't calculated? The $1,500.
So why do you mean it's not calculated?
Like it's not being, is that the A and B?
Oh, it's not subtracted.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's not. The thing is, even if I use an extra room at home, for instance, to work on my business, the room doesn't burn away or disappears. It's just that I could be, so what could you do with that room? You could use it. But one thing you could do is rent it, for instance. So these are A and B are the price of using. So this is the total value. It's not a flow, but then the flow cost of using your own capital is A and B. Risk-free return and risk premium.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah, you really have to think. Imagine you have this room that you can either rent to somebody else or use for your own business. So since it's foregone income that you cannot rent it to somebody else because you're using it, then you have to take it into account. All right. Yeah, now how do we write the profit? We usually use a Greek letter pi. So it's the same pi that is 3.14159. So that's the same pi here. So we use in economics, we use this to designate the profits. So yeah, Greek letters are used in every disciplines. Yeah, so it's the total revenue minus total cost. So total cost is implicit cost plus explicit cost, and total revenue is how much soup I sell multiplied by how much what's the price of soup. Okay, time horizons. So we already talked about different time horizons when we were talking about the supply curves or demand curves. So what we're saying is in the short run, things are not easy to adjust. So I can adjust very tiny things, but big decisions, I cannot change them. So if I have a car, for instance, I cannot go and buy a new car tomorrow. I have to shop for it, and yeah, it's complicated. So it's the same thing for firms. In the short run, firms cannot change a lot of things, but in the long run, then they can make more changes. So what we're going to see is that some factors of production, especially the factory itself or the machines, are what we call fixed factors. So we cannot change them right away. If the market conditions change, we would like to have a bigger firm or a smaller firm. Well, the flock, we're stuck with what we have. It takes time to change it. Yeah, so you can see it's usually capital, but it may be land, service of management, or even supply of skilled labor, because it may take time if you are. So say if you're a university and you want to open a new position, then it takes time to hire new people. It may take 1 year, for instance, for the whole hiring process to hire some star researcher at your university, for instance. Whereas if you're say McDonald's, then it does you just run some ad, or you put some ad in the front of the store, and then some person can come next day to work there. So it can be very easy to adjust. So yeah, it depends on how skillful labor is. Inputs that are not fixed. So as I said, unskilled labor may be easy to change. Working hours. So if you ask your employees to work overtime, then this you can decide right away if you want some more overtime today or not. Electricity bill, it depends. If it's the electricity bill for heating, then this is just, if it's winter, you have to heat your factory no matter what. But if it's how long you run the machines, then of course you can just turn them off if you don't have any things to produce today. Short run is not some specific length of time. Yeah, it could be like a day or an hour or a week, but it really says, well, this is short run compared to that other thing. So it's a matter of comparison. Yeah, I could just say variable factors or something like, yeah, working hours. Variable. Like electricity. To some extent. So what is the long run? Well, it's the long run, length of time over which you can basically change almost everything. The only thing here we say we cannot change is the technology itself. So what we're saying is, okay, so this is the way my factory works. I can make it bigger, smaller. I can buy some other machine, but yeah, we say that the way things are made are not, I cannot invent things overnight because it takes a long time to develop new things. So if you think about pharmaceutical, well, actually, pharmaceutical is it's a strange thing because until recently, you would have imagined it takes 10 years or 20 years to develop a new vaccine. But then for COVID, it took 1 year. So this is, of course, yeah, a lot of the research had been done before, but still implementing that into new vaccines in just 1 year is breathtaking. So you could even say in that case that the technology of the vaccine itself was not so much a very long run, just a long run. I don't know. So it depends on the context. It's economics. So whatever you say, this is long run, this is short run. If you justify it well, then it's fine. But yeah, so if normally you would say that very long run, then everything can change. But so there's famous economist, I don't remember who said, yeah, in the very long run, who cares? We're all dead. But our children might not be, so it would be good to leave them some nice environments, nice planet. Yeah, but maybe we're not around anymore to see that. Okay. So how do we write stuff a bit more precisely? So total and average product. Total product is the total amount produced during a given period of time. So it would be Y. Yeah. How was I think it was Q was F of LK. So this is total product would be Q. And the average product, what is it? It's the total product divided by some input. So for instance, we can see that so if we divide by labor, so we see that the quantity of labor is L, then average product is total product divided by L. So it will be equal to F of LK divided by L. I think they use the small f, right? If I'm not mistaken. So this would mean what's the productivity of an extra input unit of L. So for instance, an extra worker at McDonald's produces 10 extra Big Macs. Yeah, that's, I don't know. Maybe how many a minute? Like one extra Big Mac a minute. So the average output of one worker would be one Big Mac. On average, right? Yeah, it's not well written. I would say one. Yeah, this is marginal. Sorry. So I would say on average. Our worker at McDonald's produces one Big Mac a minute. Yeah, that's a bit better way to write it. I don't know. If somebody has worked at McDonald's, they can tell me if that's a good number. Marginal product, yeah, that's what I was wanting to say.
So it's 10
Yeah, go ahead.
I have to go.
Oh yeah,
so
it's 10 o'clock. Sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When will midterms scores come out?
What are the when are the grades graded?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should be graded soon. Thing is, it's all it's on Moodle, so it's very fast in principle. They just have to look at what the distribution is. So maybe my teaching was so good that now everybody has 99% and they don't know what to do. They're confused. So we'll see. But yeah,
Wait, who grades them? A sort of machine, or is it like actual people?
It's on Moodle. So on Moodle, yeah, it's Q&A. It's multiple choice questions. So it's very fast. It's instantaneous. Okay. Yeah. So you shouldn't have to wait too long.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Are teachers going to review our answers, or it's only bots that gets to compute your grade?
Well, so anyways, you didn't write anything, right? It's just ABCDE.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like it would be different if some grader graded your copy or it was graded automatically.
Okay.
Sir, is it possible that we can get more time on the labs due this weekend since most of us have midterms? Like maybe like
yeah,
Tuesday,
like
so that
2 days or something.
Yeah, okay, I can
yeah, would you some time too?
Let me take a note of this request and see what I can do about it. I'm not saying yes, but because it has to be some concerted decision by everybody. So
okay, we have a group chat where we discuss things, and that seems to be the consensus.
Wow, I'm so surprised. Students have the consensus that they should get more time to finish their work.
Well, we all have midterms on Sunday.
No, it's perfectly legitimate.
It's more that the lab 7 is due Sunday and we haven't finished the la matière for chapter 7. So
yeah. Oh, is that so?
yeah.
Yeah,
7 is due Sunday.
There's 2 labs for like the same day, so
Yeah, 6
that's
and
why
7
we
are.
thought like.
I didn't think about that. Good point.
Let me check that real quick.
Lab 7 should be removed, at least for now.
Yeah, but so what's the oh yeah. Lab 7, what's the is it this chapter?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think so.
the labs fit with the chapters.
Hmm. Okay, so it doesn't give you a lot of time to finish it, right? Okay. Yeah, okay, I see it's very short. All right, so I'll tell that to Moshe. Yeah. Okay, so I'll ask.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. No problem.
Thanks a lot.
Other questions?
You're gonna post the first thing we did today, right? The graph.
Yeah, I posted that. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, then thank you very much and have a good week. Or yeah, a good.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
That's all.
Bye.
Bye.
Professor,
Yeah.
for the second midterm, is it going to be cumulative or only from chapter 6 to I forgot which one?
6 to 10, yeah.
So only 6. So only the final is cumulative.
Yeah, 1 to 11, 16, and 32, 33. It's written.
All right. Thanks a lot, Professor.
My pleasure.